Hey everyone, you're watching Conversations in Pop Culture, and I am your host, Andrew Davis. And before I introduce my guest, I would like to remind everyone you need to support and financially support what you love, whether it is this show, my guest's comic, or corporate media. I personally do not care as long as you are supporting what you love, because if you do not support what you love, this stuff doesn't get made. But enough about that, because I do want to introduce my guest, and I have with me Omari Malik. So, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, man. It's Omari Malik. Brooklyn's in the house.
I think I got it right, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, you said it perfectly.
Oh, perfectly. I'm always nervous when I have not seen a name before and you told it to me, but I always mess it up. But I'm excited to have you here. I really am. And I like your book. It's interesting. And as I stated, you are in the middle of a Kickstarter right now with Blacktooth Battalion Volume 1.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I know some people probably have seen your book and heard about it, and I know others have not. But what is the basic premise of your book for those who know nothing about it and are hearing about it for the first time?
So the basic premise is it's an anthology, and without nerding out too much. So if people go back to the original days or the early days of comics, you see books like Action Comics, Tales of Suspense, Amazing Fantasy, Detective Comics. All of those were basically anthologies. So it's like the characters that we all know and love were just one story of many within a comic. Same thing with like more modern stuff like Shonen Jump and things like that. So basically, the Black Tooth Battalion is kind of my version of that, where it's an anthology that features different stories, and it'll kind of the idea is to have it kind of be like the flagship book or the flagship comic for my publishing company. That as new characters get developed, we'll put out a one shot within the Black Tooth Battalion, and then from there they'll spin off into different series. So it's three books in one. So for people that are interested in the Kickstarter, you can basically get it. You can get it like this, which is the trade paperback, which contains all three stories, or you can buy the books individually as one shots. It's basically as individual one shots. So it's three stories. One's a manga. One I tell people it's like a teen drama, and then the third one is basically like an action story, kind of the most traditional comic book story, but with my own unique spin to it.
Yeah, and let's even talk about where did this idea come from, because I think you were touching upon it a little bit, but it is an anthology and it's three separate, stories. But obviously, there's a trade paperback, but there's also the individual, stuff to them. And so, where did even that idea come from to do it this way? Because some people do, one shot on Kickstarter, but you decided to do almost three books at the same time.
Yeah, so I guess it came from the birthplace of the idea is just being a comic book fan. So I tell people this is like 2 years in a lifetime in the making. And I say 2 years in a lifetime because 2 years of actual work, writing the stories, finding the artists, putting the books together. But the lifetime is just being that kid that was drawing in composition notebooks, drawing on any scraps of paper and just coming up with a bunch of characters. Like every day, wanting to make a new superhero, wanting to make a new villain, and wanting to do a lot of that stuff. So when I decided that I kind of wanted to pursue comics seriously, I had so much stuff that I didn't just want to necessarily be married to one idea. And also, as I described it, all the books are kind of different. So I didn't want to, kind of come into the industry and just be known for one thing or kind of be pigeonholed. It's like this is a way to express myself as a writer, writing in three different genres and writing three different types of stories, and scratching that creative itch of like, oh, I want to do a manga. I love Saturday morning cartoons. I want to do something that's like that. I love things that are more like serious, kind of actiony. So I wanted to do something like that. So obviously, basically when I graduated from college, I kind of came up with what would be the ideas, and out of that, only one of them survived, and actually, is one of the comics on the Kickstarter. But well, technically two, because the main character of one of the books was a villain in like my original thoughts. But wanted to put together something that was diverse, something that would give people an introduction into not only me but what my company is, because this is first and foremost like Blacktooth Publishing is a publishing company. So it's like I want to put out comics. I want to not only do I want to put out my own comics, I want to put out other people's comics. I have a novel that I'm working on. I have I have friends that I'm in negotiations with, to do poetry books and things like that. So I wanted people, when they first see us, they understand that, we're going to have a plethora of products and things like that.
Yeah, so let's even talk about that a little bit because obviously, we are in the age of small press, indie press. I mean, I said this before where I believe it is indie comics, then there's small publishing, and then you get into, the third tier, the secondary tier, and then the big two or big three. So what is that like? Because there's a lot of indie publishing groups coming up and a bunch of things, and I have a bunch of friends like Travis Gibb does Orange Cone. I just had David Whalen on who does correct handed comics. And so what is this like to enter that space and do your own stuff, but then go into the idea of putting out other things too, and both comics and not comics, because it is getting interesting now, I feel, where a lot of people are popping up and it's cheaper than ever to do it.
So a lot of that's come from I was a punk rock kid, and when I say I was a punk rock kid, like I literally grew up playing guitar. Like this shirt that right now that I'm wearing is like a local band from Richmond called Brace Wars. So big and with that kind of punk rock and like ethos and things like that, like I've always wanted to do things myself. And then there's always kind of needed to be somebody that was kind of a leader to shepherd in people that might not necessarily what's going on. And I think of like my friends when I was in the metalcore scene, the punk rock scene, my friends that became promoters, not because they necessarily wanted to be promoters, but they were booking shows for their own band, and they're like, you have other bands that come around and don't really know what they're doing, so you just kind of fall into that. And the fact that I went to college, I have a master's degree in business and things like that, so it's like not wanting to waste that time that I put into it, but also wanting to be able to be a person that can guide the ship for people who have ideas but might not necessarily know how to articulate them and things like that. So ironic you kind of bring that up because the first thing I ever put out, I co-wrote it with a friend of mine who has a fashion brand called Barriers, and he recently did a sneaker for Converse. So that was like the first official release from Blacktooth. Is that basically, I did a tie-in comic that kind of revealed a little bit of the storytelling and gave people kind of a cool story to go along with my friend's two Converse sneakers. So and there's more stuff like that in the works. I'm pushing my mother. My mother's a Southern woman, so she's heavily into cooking, so I'm pushing her to do a cookbook and things like that. But I feel like everybody has a story to tell, and everybody can be a writer, or it's almost like that human nature thing, sitting around a campfire just trading stories. But it's like it just takes one person to sit there and be like, all right, we should write this down, or I'll have you record it and we'll transcribe it, and we'll put something together.
No, see, it's interesting because I have a lot of friends, and obviously, I know people from the Silvers reign, and I know Roderick Curtis does Royal House, and then my friend Dwayne Maudry is doing something, and then obviously I mentioned Travis Gibbon. So it's just such a fascinating industry right now because 3 years ago in comics, small publishing houses weren't as big, and they've only gotten bigger because of COVID. And so it's a really fascinating thing. And obviously, I'm not into that right now. I have my own thing that I'm doing with this. And obviously, this is a much larger company. There's other things going on with it. And I don't want to write something right now because I have a good working business and I'm making decent money for once in my life in my side hustle that I don't want to add on another responsibility. But that doesn't mean I won't be a writer at some point. But to dive into your stories, because there's three that I know of well enough to talk about them. And I'm probably gonna get the names wrong, so you're gonna have to correct me. And then I got no problem admitting that I might get the name wrong, but I think it's Adestra, I want to say,
Yeah, so Adastra, so it comes from the Greek phrase Adastra per aspera, which it just means to the stars with perseverance.
so this is what it looks like for those who are curious, and this is what she looks like. So this is the book, and then this is just a picture of her. And there's some stuff going on with this one where obviously, she's a 15-year-old superhero, and she is, a teenage girl, and she is a shapeshifter, but she doesn't know who she is. Despite being able to be anything she wants physically, at the very least. She's trying to figure that out, and she's also trying to save the world. And she might be finding a boy cute in the process. I'm just saying, it's very possible here. And what is this like? Because it's nice to have that, teenage superhero who doesn't have the confidence that we see in, these other superheroes that are out there that are seasoned veterans, and that, she might not even want to really be a superhero either to some degree. And she's still a teenage girl, if that makes any sense. I'm
Yes.
trying to say this in the least offensive way possible.
No, definitely. Like I feel like you're hitting the nail on the head for everything. So I tell people the easiest way to describe it is when you're a 15-year-old, whether you're a boy or a girl, everyone's telling you you can be anything you want to be. But what would you do if you really could and you were having a hard time finding yourself or being who you wanted to be? So, and that's inspired partially. One, I have a younger sister, and I saw my younger sister while she was getting through high school, go through a bunch of phases, and really just trying to learn who she is as a person. And more so for me, when I was in high school, I was really into music, and I didn't mind listening to my parents and things like that when they were telling me, "Hey, just go to college and just do this." But for my little sister, I did see her struggle with having too many choices and kind of not being sure. And I also, my ex girlfriend in college, was into so many different things. When I say into a bunch of clubs, into a bunch of different friends groups, so they were being pulled in a bunch of different directions. And being a superhero fan that I am, I wanted to add that extra element. Like, what do you do when you want to hang out with your friends, when you have parents that are a bit overbearing, where you're trying to hang out, you're starting to notice the opposite sex, you're into fashion, you have to study, but then at the same time you want to be a superhero, but like maybe you have a curfew and you're not like Peter Parker where you just break your curfew and don't care. Like, you actually have to listen, and you might not have time to study, and just you're pulled in so many different directions. Because I feel like in real life that's a real thing that a lot of people have to go through, that are in the clubs, are student athletes and things like that, and just really wanted to play up on that and kind of make something fun. Like I say, I tell people like this one is like a teen drama slash like Saturday morning cartoon, because I grew up watching Disney Channel. I grew up watching Teen Nick and things like Sabrina the Teenage Witch, Braceface, and all those sort of things. So I wanted something that was fun, something that felt authentic, something that felt down to earth, and something where people would read it and be like, you know what? If I really had superpowers, I don't know if I could get out of my house on a Thursday night to go save the world. And what would that really look like?
Because it's interesting, because obviously this hits a niche for some people, and then for other people they're like, it's an interesting book, and that's what's fun though. But everybody also does remember. Hopefully, people remember when they're 15. Some people don't want to remember when they were 15. I'm one of those kids that I don't want to remember 15. I don't. I didn't have a bad childhood, but my 20s were a lot more fun than my 13 to 20 was in a lot of ways. And so, but I think everybody can relate to her, and I think that's something that's fascinating as well, because and the character that I think of in Marvel is Miss Marvel, because Miss Marvel is coming into her powers, and she's facing adversity, and she's discovering that she has powers, and she's in school. And it was a very well done book by Marvel, and it was brilliant. And so that's how I view this book in a lot of ways too, is that it's very similar to that. And
And
so
I get,
what?
yeah,
Yeah.
keep going by all means, man. Keep going.
No. That was it. You can go. You can interrupt me. I'm
Oh,
perfectly fine.
Oh, and I was gonna say, like, people remember. Not only are people remembering when they're 15, but it's like one of those things where it's like she not her. It's it's almost like an overbearing metaphor in a sense of like, listen, she's going to change. Like the person that we were at 15 is not the person we are eventually become. I, People see it all the time, looking through their high school yearbooks and just being like, freshman year you and senior year you are completely different people. So it's just, driving that metaphor home of like really growing up and going through changes and things like that. It's like, the most overt representation of that is the fact that she's a shapeshifter.
In many ways, it's almost a dig to some degree. Like, and maybe not a dig. A dig's not the right word. It's a rib. I'm
Yeah.
a big wrestling fan, and so it's almost like you're ribbing the reader a little bit. The fact that you can be when you're 15, you're just starting your high school career, and it's like you can do anything you want to do. If you want to be a veterinarian, you can go do that. If you want to be, a lawyer, you can go do that. If you want to be a doctor, you can go do that. And the fact that she can transform into anything, yet she doesn't know, is such a rib, and
Yeah.
it's so brilliant. And it's so simple that it's really just clever. And I think it's nice, the fact though that this is also a one shot, so
So
I, as the reader, don't need to, have previous knowledge. And I also don't need to worry about something else coming out of this right this second either. And if it does get an ongoing series, you know, this might be a prequel, or it might be reworked, or it might be somewhere in the middle, or it just might be an addition story to the ongoing, if you so choose to continue it, or some version of it. But that's something that I think is just really nice about this one in particular, is I think people can relate to it very well.
yeah, so I mean, you definitely, like I said, hit the nail as far as like I wanted the one shots to basically be pilots. Obviously, I'm hoping they do well, and I've done conventions, and I'm doing another convention this weekend. So I'm taking in the reception and the feedback to see kind of what people want, and to see where the story
Yeah,
will
we're
go.
going to talk about that
Yeah, we're to
in
see
a
where the
second.
stories will go and change. But I wanted to give people something, that no matter what, you can pick this up, read it, know what's going on, and I'll let everybody, and hopefully, when issue 30 of Adastra comes out, I'll let people use their head canon and be like, well, the one shot that actually where she debuted it actually happens between issues 11 and 12, or just like, let.
So we're going to table that because this is interesting, and you mentioned a few things, but I do want to talk about the other two
Mhm.
first before we get into that, because this is actually a really interesting point. But you have Dogpile, which is the second story, or the second one shot, and I'm purposely skipping that question. I promise we're going to talk about it because it's super interesting on a business level. But I do want to talk about Dogpile, and this is Dogpile for those who are curious about it. That's, you can pick that book up, and then that's just an image from it. And guys, it's about cats. I just want to make that crystal. It's all about cats. It's all about kittens. There's nothing to do with dogs about it. No, obviously, I'm gonna get the name wrong. I'm not even gonna try, man. But your main character had a tragic accident that made him lose everything, and he basically built a new family. And he's now an adult, and he has 7 dogs. And him and his 7 dogs are basically trying to stop bad things from happening to other people, like they sort of happened to him. And he's gonna face his past in some fashion, of what happened, how it happened, why it happened. And obviously there's going to be some interesting twists to it. And his dogs may have powers, he has powers. And again, I'm going to get the name wrong, and I just don't want to embarrass myself any further than I do that on my own.
Yeah, so my main character, like I said, you're hitting the nail on the head with everything. So my main character, Daquan, basically, as a child, he kind of lost his entire family. Like there's a preview of what happened, or at least or at least an allusion to what happened in the book. So one of those moments where my character lost everything, and he ran away. He ran away, one, to find a new family, and two, to find strength. And that strength, as in real life, when you go looking for strength, or you're looking for a way to overcome it, any adversity, you kind of realize that the most strength and the greatest power comes from within yourself. So he kind of tapped into, what will be revealed later on, a well of power, and just like power within him, and basically manifested superpowers. And along that way, he connected with 7 dogs. So the dogs are stray dogs, or dogs that he rescued, and things like that. And you know I have a dog myself, and family members have had dogs, and dogs are kind of like one of my favorite animals. And playing up on the fact, animals being used for therapy and just being used for companionship and things like that. So, he really made his own family with dogs, and he can communicate with the dogs. They're in sync, they're a team. And with that in mind, running away and traveling and figuring out everything and finding the strength to, come back home and face everything that he ran away from. Now with those dogs, like you said, he's trying to save the not necessarily trying to save the world, but trying to leave his imprint and make sure that people don't feel that same pain that he felt.
The way I describe it is I had a wrestling friend in Brooklyn, actually, Logan Black. And I don't know. He runs he teaches at a wrestling school in Brooklyn, where he lives. And Logan teaches to his students, your job is to come into a place and then leave it better than you found it. And very much, Daquan, I feel, is that type of character where he's not trying to change the world and stop a criminal or, solve world hunger per se. But he's saying, hey, look, if I can leave, and save somebody's life and then leave them in a better position, then I accomplished something. And it's a very interesting book to that degree, where I don't feel like he's the same as, your first character,
Yeah.
uh, where she is a superhero for lack, or she's beginning to become a superhero. I feel like it's a better description. Where and Daquan, on the other hand, is saying, hey, look, I just want to leave this better than I found it. And he also wants to get, I feel, closure and finalization and maybe come to terms with what happened 7 years ago in a lot of ways, is how I read it at the very least.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Like I said, and that's a part of it where it's like I said, it's based off trauma and, like you said, reconciliation and just trying to get over some things where it's like, you're very hesitant about jumping in head first with it, because he is, even as he might charge into a fight, afraid to lose his family, afraid, to not be there for his dogs, afraid for his dogs not to be there. But, as a part of that healing process, he's more afraid that somebody else will be in that position. So it's like, if he could avoid everything, he probably would, but he's still like, no, I have to do something. Or like, you know, I have to be the change I want to see.
It's interesting, and obviously, I mean, that's where this goes, and I don't want to dive into too much more twisting there because obviously, I mean, that's kind of the basic outline of it, but it's very interesting in that regard too, and it's a different book than obviously your first one, and then the third book, which is Snakebite, which is definitely more anime-esque in a lot of ways, and that's just a picture from it, and then this is the book that can be picked up as, a one shot, um, obviously focuses on a character that sounds similar to your name. I don't know if that was intentional. I'm just saying that Malik Onini.
Onini, yeah.
And so yeah, he's interesting because he's just released from juvenile detention center. Get some new ink to celebrate. I guess that's what you do when you did a stint in juvie. And then, and then this new ink apparently he went to the wrong guy, and then he got superpowers. But now he's trying to figure out what to do with them and what to use them for because he is a juvenile delinquent. He's trying to turn over a new leaf, but I don't think his old ways are gone so easily. And he might end up in a few situations. And I don't want to say he's the Punisher, but I don't think he's like a villain. But I don't think he's a good guy either. But I don't think he's an anti-hero, if that makes any sense either. And really exploring that idea with him. And I think it's an interesting topic to talk about when you have a character that does both good and bad.
Yeah, so like a snake, he's slithering. He's on the path of good or evil. So, like you said in your synopsis, he just got out of juvenile detention. And being what is it, 17? Not really quite old enough to get tattoos, but
Let's just say that he's a dumb kid. He doesn't have wisdom.
exactly. So
It's a nice way to put it, right?
yeah, so his friends are like, trying to be rambunctious, and trying to be a little bit growner than they should be. They go get tattoos, but his tattoos happen to give him superpowers, and those friends are the ones that that maybe they were with him when he got arrested, or maybe they was just happened to be the one time that he got caught and they ran a little bit faster than him. But he, after doing that, is having those second thoughts about what he's doing. It's not all fun anymore, but they're still fully engaged. They want to start trouble. They want to start to still be bad and things like that. But one, he's being pulled in a direction because he's seeing the consequences. Like anybody's parents, after you get in trouble, they want you to stay on the straight and narrow. But being that when you're young and you're susceptible, things seem fun, and your friends are still into it.
Yeah,
And
it also gets interesting because obviously when you have power, I'll use myself as an example. The second you get power and you're a young kid and you get a big opportunity to make a choice, and even if it's saying what restaurant we're going to and your parents give you a complete thing, carte blanche, there gets to a point where you sometimes make the wrong decision. Sometimes you have a hard time figuring out what the correct decision is. And then even as you get an adult, when you have two great decisions in front of you, it's sometimes hard. And so that's something. And then you give a 17-year-old that it's not so simple. It's
no,
not so simple. And then you got your friends doing something. You also realize you have this power. I don't know. And I don't remember if his parents were involved or if they know, or if they're just not in this entire book at the moment. But obviously, you now have a massive responsibility and you have consequence in your hands. And your friends sort of know that. And I think his friends know that a little bit, that if they go rob a bank, he could shoot out some serious power that's going to make the job a hell of a lot easier.
exactly. So it deals in one of the things, just like with the other books, of having that real life element play into it. It's like everybody kind of has that moment where whether even if it's something as far as you know s- coming and skipping school, like playing a little bit too much, shoplifting, or just doing just childish misbehaving. They're the kids that take it too far. And then that kid that gets slapped on the wrist one time and gets that one detention is like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
It's called scared straight.
Exactly. So that yeah, so that too. So it's just like, you know, being young and being at a point where, before shit really hits the fan and you get too old for it to be a problem, it's like, how do you kind of navigate it? Obviously, I have plans for the book, and, it'll be a very different book when the consequences matter and it's no longer just a few months in juvie, but it's like, really, what is he going to do? Because, like you mentioned, he's not all the way reformed yet, but he's not all the way lost either. He's really
It
towing
also
the line.
it also gets to the point where he has powers, and there's a concept too where what it is, you could do something fun and like that's not gonna harm anybody, but still shouldn't be done too. And it's the idea that if he uses his powers and he makes a bunch of balloons blow up out of Central Park, for lack of a better word, is that wrong? Yes, but it could be fun too. But then where does that go with the idea? Then you take that and you rob a bank,
Exactly.
or he wants to impress a girl and he does something with his powers to impress a girl, but somebody gets injured.
So I got, like you said, being just a dumb kid, just having too much fun for your own good and things like that. So I can't imagine, we've all seen those friends who get the car first, and, they don't come home by the time of curfew and things like that. So could we really imagine what we were doing if, we had superpowers and we're trying to impress people, even if it's the point of, just trying to make the
Oh
soccer
man,
team or the basketball team, or just like, you
high
know,
school would have been so much better if I had superpowers. So
exactly.
much better. I'd be like, I'm the new quarterback.
Exactly. So
Oh my god, it would be blast. Oh man, I wish I had powers in high school. And instead, I was just smart. That was like I worked hard and I was just smart. But I was like on the peripherals. Nobody really bothered me. Me and my friends were in like the nerd group, and they're still my friends, which is great. Nothing has changed except that we're all better off now, and Yeah. So, but I digress. I digress on that. This is not about me.
Mhm.
But yeah, that's the basic premise of the book. But I do want to get into what you mentioned before, because your concept of an anthology, and obviously, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you can get these books individually. So let's say
Yeah,
somebody says, I'm a collector and I'm not a trade paperback guy, or I think there's real value in this, or I just want all three of them, and not as a comic and not as a graphic novel or a trade paperback. You can do that. You could get
yeah,
one of them, or you could get just a trade paperback and read it, and you're just a reader, or you could get the whole shebang, for lack of a better word. But what is this like? Because obviously, when you go into a trade paperback, one of the things that's interesting about this is, let's say that Dogpile is not a good book, right? But it's in a trade paperback. Well, the other two are phenomenal. And somebody might say to you, look, I don't want to purchase Dogpile alone, but I like the other two, and the other two carry it. But I enjoy Dogpile, but I don't enjoy it enough to buy it on its own. Because that's what I think your anthology does very nicely. And that's what Shonen Jump did. And that's what my friend Luke Stone has, an anthology. And there could be, he may or may not have a book in there that somebody loves, that, carries the book, or there might be five stories in it, and one of them people enjoy, but they don't want to buy it on its own, if that makes any sense.
yeah. So I mean, that was definitely a part of the thought process. Not to say, I was thinking about putting out anything weak. I thought that they were all great stories, but I feel like it's something being that they're
But
all.
you know what I mean, where
Yeah, no, I
I
definitely
don't
know what
think
you
they're
mean.
badly written, but sometimes something won't connect. I'll
Yeah,
give you an
so
example, right?
yeah,
So let's say that horror is right now really big in comics. 6 years ago, horror wasn't where it was. So if you had a horror book in an anthology 6 years ago, that horror book, if it was done today, would carry that book.
yeah,
First thing 6 years ago, it wasn't carrying the book. It doesn't mean that it was badly written. It just means that sometimes you got a book that's just red hot. A topic is red hot, right?
yeah,
You know,
and it's pulling
the
every.
Phillies in baseball are red hot right now. That's the point. But continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no. So I say that to say it's like with the anthology, it's like basically, like I said, they're available, if you just want the individual one shots and whatnot. But it's also, I feel like they're so different that it's like, if a Dasher hits for you right now and you don't care for the other two, but if you grab the trade, eventually I'm a person where it's like I haven't liked things, but then give me some time and let me live life a little bit more and come back to it and it'll be completely different. So and that mixed in with like, being able to introduce people to different things. Like I have like bringing up my ex-girlfriend or whatever, she was a big, Korean drama, anime. She was watching more anime than I have. So, she's the type of person where it's like she would pick it up for Dogpile, but then just knowing who she is, having a Dasher there right before it or right after it would make her find something that she normally wouldn't pick up. And the same thing for
Yeah.
people that might really be into anti-hero stories, that don't necessarily
That's
like,
the thing too.
it's
That
something. Keep going? No, you can go.
No, 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 no. I think this is interesting because, so for instance, somebody might be called to Dogpile, for instance, because they're a dog lover. And since Dogpile and Adastra and Snakebite are all in the same book in a trade paperback, somebody might come for one thing, right? And then they'll stay for the other, right? And then they'll love the second thing and the third thing, but they're not there for those two things. So the thing that got them into what you're doing is, Dogpile, but it becomes an entry point. It's one of the things about my show that I set up. I don't just interview comic people. I interview mainstream comic people. I interview wrestlers. I interview voice actors. I interview cosplayers, because what the whole point, and this was set up 10 years ago in a very smart way, almost 10 years ago, where I realized that, well, I'm not going to convert every cosplayer. If I only convert 10% of the people who like cosplay into the other stuff, but then I convert the 10% from wrestlers, all of a sudden now I have a very diverse audience, and it
Yeah,
actually benefits every guest, because it doesn't matter how they came into it. What matters is that they're here now.
exactly. And that was a point of like even wanting to do three different books because it's like as you can tell, they're written from different tones. They have different characters, and they have kind of different audiences and things like that. So it's like I feel like this being my introduction into the comic book world and things like that, it won't be too crazy when people see me do something with science fiction. It won't be insane when people see me do something with horror because they're like, well, he did a manga, he did a teen drama, he did like you, and we're all comic book fans. We've seen the wall in the comic shop, and it's like, all right, I like action books. I'm only here for Batman. You want me to get something else? Get out of here. But it's like this, and I feel like it'll make people a little bit more accepting. That they might not try to pigeonhole me into be like, oh, I only like stuff like Dogpile. Where it's like, listen, man, if you give it a chance, it'll be here. Like I think it was a lot of planning to this. Like I have thought about this long and hard to the point where after this Kickstarter, all of the books, are at least going to go to a full 6-issue arc that is going to talk about how they got their powers and things like that.
So yeah, let's even go into that because I was speaking to my friend Travis Kidd from Orange Cone, and Travis has been on like 6, 7 times on this show in 3 years, which is crazy in of itself. But me and Travis have a very interesting relationship, and it's a good relationship. And what Travis was explaining to me is that he has a friend, and I'm not going to say who it is, but he is a brand. So the way I view myself is that I am a brand. So I am not, I mean, I'm obviously conversations in pop culture, I'm pop anime comics, I'm a variety of other things, but I am not a podcast per se. I'm obviously hosting this show, but I'm a brand. And I think that it's very hard to pigeonhole me because in, a few weeks, I'm going to be hosting a very interesting panel show that is going to be, what I deem very different than this, where it's going to be professional, it's going to be very intellectual, and we're going to be talking about issues in comics. And then I'm also teaching a class, which is also very different. But again, it's my brand. So I don't view myself, and if I ever do write a comic or a book or anything like that, you might see me writing something about history in a nonfiction or an autobiography of somebody or a biography. And then you might see me write a book on how to invest. But you're going to see the same quality. And I think that's something that comic people don't realize is that you can think of yourself as a comic writer. That's fine. Or you can think of yourself saying, I'm a brand. And so
Yeah.
now I want to sell my name. So I want people to go and, Pop Anime Comics, Andrew Davis, Conversations in Pop Culture. That's a brand. There's a certain standard. There's a certain mythology surrounded by what he is saying. And I think that's a big thing that people have to understand. And I'm curious how you feel about that because it seems to me that that's kind of what you want to be a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Like for one, I want people to understand that with Blacktooth, you're getting quality. Like you're getting story first. But then I also like you mentioned, wanting myself to be a brand where it's like if I wrote I want people to know that one, if it has the Blacktooth logo on it, we didn't skip on it. We didn't skip on a budget. We're not trying to bullshit you. We want something that you'll enjoy. And you can guarantee if I'm writing something for Blacktooth or, helping a friend of mine co-write something or anything that I do, it's going to be meticulously planned out. There's going to be that attention to detail. There's going to be, that detailed storytelling and things like that. And being able to one carry the name of have my name carry some weight and people say, if I see Omari Malik on it, I know it's good because I saw this guy do this and being able to, like you said, take that chance of being able to do different things. Because for me, this is just the beginning. Obviously, like I mentioned, like I have ideas to take all 3 of these stories to full series, and then ideas for so many different things. For
Yeah.
some of the stuff that I get excited just thinking about. What I'm gonna roll out next year, and having the next few years of just like even starting to do concept art and pull together reference photos for different things I want to do, and stuff won't look like Dogpile. The stuff won't look like Snakebite, but it'll still be interesting. It'll still be dope. And once people see how these stories develop, they're gonna be like, this is great. Like I remember how this started, where it's going, and it's like,
So let's even talk about that too, because obviously, I mean, this is an anthology. This is volume 1, and I go back to Luke Stone, who's a friend too, and his entire theory is that if something catches fire in one of his books, it'll get spun off and then something else will come into it. Or you look at Ben Dunn from Antarctic Press, who does Exciting Comics. And so Exciting Comics does it a little bit differently, though, where they might take something that was on Kickstarter and then break it up into issues. But there are books that have been tested in Excited Comics that then have been released in their own things outside of Excited Comics because the demand for them was there. And so obviously, if all of a sudden, the Kickstarter gets funded and people say, look, Dogpile is the shit, right? For lack of a better word. And this is the book, right? And it's crystal clear. The other two are fine, but this is the book. And it's the book, right? That then you might spin off Dogpile and people say, look, the other two are good and I enjoy them, but you might spin off two of them and then keep one of them in this book. And then volume 2 continues that story and going forward. And so obviously it's a very interesting test position, I feel. And I think that more people are going to start doing that because 3 different stories can help carry a book and get it funded and make sure it doesn't sink. And this is a business. And I hate to say it this way, and it sounds mean, right?
But it's the truth, man. It's definitely the truth, and that's a part of it. So it's like you mentioned, obviously, the Kickstarter's here, and going to cons and asking for feedback, and talking to people and things like that to see, planning for the, one of it's funny. Like there was a band out of North Carolina that had a song with a great title that I'll never forget. Hope for the best and pray for the rest. So with that in mind, I want all 3 of them to be hit, but which one will come first will be determined by the people. Which one will it'll be determined by the feedback. But there are ideas in place for all of them to come. It's the same way I put this book together where I didn't start all 3 at the same time.
And also sometimes, I'll give you an example, here would be that snake bites. You can do it in an anthology, and maybe it's the type of book that there's an idea that you might want to do all of these by themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there might be a position where you might say, look, Snakebite needs to be in that anthology because it's a stable and it's going to make that anthology. And while, the other 2 are going to be fine on their own and they're going to be great, Snakebite needs to be there because it's in the right role. It's doing its job. And that's the book that for the next 6 volumes of this entire, anthology, it's going to be the stable. And then we're going to test the 2 other ideas. And then out of that, come volume 3, another idea is going to spin off. Because that's the thing about business too, is that if you're creating something, you need stables. And it doesn't mean it could be that Snakebite is your best book. But the fact that it's keeping that anthology alive and it's getting people to return to it. And this is where this all gets tricky on business. And it's crazy going into it, but it's a business problem versus a creativity problem.
Yeah, for sure. And that, like you mentioned, or like I've been plotting, like that's the idea behind it of having the anthology be there for the testing ground of, in 10 years, Black Tooth Battalion Volume 100 might have a new creator, that's a little that isn't that's not polished enough to go to Image, but we come through and train them along and kind of push them along and say, listen, you can have a backup in volume 101 or whatever, and it'll just write a pilot. It'll be a testing ground. If it looks completely different, that'll just make this even more valuable because we'll completely redo it, but just having it kind of be a testing ground and be a place where ideas can live, ideas can grow, things can be organic without living and dying by the fact of like issue 1 everything has to be perfect.
Yeah, because I just think it's a fascinating concept, and I think that obviously Exciting Comics does it. I think a bunch of other people do it, and I think that it makes sense at this point because I think that people have to figure out ways how to test things cheaply. Because let's be realistic here, producing a comic is hard, no question about it.
Sure.
It's expensive. There's a reason why I'm not right now producing a comic. I have a business that is producing me a decent amount of money, and it takes up not all that much of my time, but I don't feel like spending money on an uncertainty right now when I'm at the impetus of starting a new job and I'm trying to stabilize a bunch of other things. And that's how I feel. And I ran a Kickstarter for this show in January, and that thing was brutal, man. It was brutal. And I mean, people were not happy me asking money for my show. And you know what is the people who were not happy about it? They weren't happy because media is not free either, guys. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this. And so creation alone is difficult. Just remember, it took God 6 days to create the entire universe.
Yeah.
Just
So
so that one day, just so that one day, he knew he couldn't create football early. He was exhausted. And so he said, I know man will create football eventually. And I would like to watch the game.
you know,
This is why we have off on Sundays.
no, it's definitely true, and that was even
The football part, of course, right?
no, but that was even a part of the business decision of, I've seen, as comic book fans, we've seen books live and die on the shelf, and we wonder what happened to that book, or like what happened, and it's like I've seen Kickstarters not get funded and things kind of be dead in the water.
So
So it's
let
like,
me ask you a question. Sorry to interrupt.
mhm.
When you see a Kickstarter not get funded, what do you feel?
For me, if it's a book I really want, man, I just hope the creator, just kind of thugs it out and kind of keeps going. That's another reason, like, my books are done. So it's like I didn't want to do a Kickstarter to be
So
able to finish my books. I
the
wanted my
way
books to be
I feel,
done.
the way I feel is it hurts because so if I didn't back the book or I wanted to read the book and I just didn't back it because we all have to make choices, it still hurts because somebody wants that book, right?
Yeah.
If it was only $10 and they were asking 4 grand, that's a little different, right? But if it's 3,500 and they're $500 short, you're like, oh, this hurts, man, because clearly enough people wanted it that it didn't happen and they didn't have enough push. And clearly, as a fan, I'm hurt, but I'm also, as a business, I'm saying this is good too because clearly it people wanted this book, but not enough people wanted this book. So the bad idea is getting somewhat stomped out. It's tricky, and
No,
because
it's but then again, even if they were to get funded, I look at it almost like music. It's like everybody can get to the studio, but not everybody can make a hit. Like, you can release the albums live and die on iTunes every day.
I mean, I'll give you a crazier example. So when I first started podcasting, so I started doing pre-recorded, then I got into live stuff. So I did a bunch of podcasts and I interviewed all these people. Legitly, 30 people started doing podcasts after I interviewed them, and they were guests on my show. And like 2, 3 weeks later, they wanted to do this, and a bunch of them did like 12 episodes. And I'm out. I'm done because they didn't realize how complicated this is. This doesn't just happen. It's a lot of work building up an audience, pushing it out, writing questions, feeling comfortable on a mic. It's expensive. And then people left for like 2 years, they've come back, and then other people are starting it. And you know what is? It's tricky to grow it. It's not easy. And it's difficult. And when you're doing 4 or 5 a week, it's exhausting. And so everybody can podcast. Not everybody's good at it.
Yeah, no, that I mean, everybody's picked up that random indie book and been like, or not even be an indie book, like a mainstream book, and just been like, oh man, this isn't good, and things like that. So it's just, I've had people start to ask me for advice or even see things and try to ask me what I'm doing. And thank God I had a mentor. Shout out to my mentor who has a great book called "It's Not Out of the World Where Spider." His name's Greg Anderson, LSA. Like, I had him in my corner to kind of answer questions, but he didn't, sugarcoat it and say, listen, man, this is hard. Like, running this Kickstarter campaign is going to be brutal. Like, and you have to do so much. And it's like anything in life, you have to do a lot. Like, in the middle of my campaign, I'm going to Baltimore to do a convention. I did New York Comic Con and, was literally at the con passing out flyers and, hitting the groundwork and not being above anything and still, posting on Facebook groups, reaching out to try to do interviews and get press. And doing so much. You know, it's a lot of hard work, but I'll definitely say it's rewarding. And if anybody wants to do it, you know, go for it, but you know, don't rush it. And I would say don't rush it that way.
I mean, I have a different opinion. I'm going to challenge you. So one of the things that I always say is that the reason why I'm right now not doing a book is it's expensive to do it. The way I mean, I have a concept. It needs to be reworked and, go through a few edits, but I think the concept is good. I'm going to thoroughly enjoy it. It's a 4-issue miniseries. I'm not going big, but I think I'm going big enough. Where I feel comfortable with 4 issues for a starter. And I have it, somewhat roughed out, but I need to put more dialogue in. But I think it's a good starting point. But anyway, it's going to be expensive, and so I have to make sure that my 401k is maxed out first. I got to make sure that other parameters economically are taken care of. So it could very well be that I don't have self-funding to even start working on this for even an issue 1 until June or July of next year. Because guess what? I'm making sure that I'm healthy enough to take the risk. So if it goes to 0, I'm not fucked, if that makes any sense.
No,
And
that's
I,
that's the same thing I did as far as, you know, self-funding it, and then, you know, making sure that things are in place where it's like, all right, fuck it, worst case scenario, I have 3 1 shots, and people aren't like, oh shit, it didn't get finished, like we don't know what the fuck is going
because
on.
people. I mean, maybe you don't know people, but I know a lot of people. I've been in this space forever. At this point, not forever, for almost 10 years, and I know people who have gone into debt. I know people who have not made their mortgage. I know people who have had their houses default. I know people who don't own a house and don't have a mortgage and they're renting. I know people who don't have good health insurance, and I'm like, I don't want to live that way. I would love to have the glory, but I also understand that if I don't, invest a certain amount of money in the long run, it's going to cost me like $300,000. And for me potentially to have a comic book, like I have to weigh those costs and I have to be very economically intelligent about it. So it could take me a while to save up to get art going and things like that. And that's what I always tell people. And when people ask for my advice, they're not asking me for comic advice, but they're asking me for economic advice. And that's what I would say to people, because I'm like, you got to make sure that you're okay with losing it all.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why I say don't rush. And I would say a lot of people don't understand the small things of just the meticulous planning to be like, all right, how much is this going to cost? Where am I going to get this money from? Like, think about that after you do everything that you could possibly do for free, whether, you know, it's coming up with color swatches and having a folder or a character Bible. Like, that is the things, those are the things that you should do everything free first, and then once all those things are set in place, then work on the money. Because
I throw another idea out there to people: equity. I
yeah,
mean, seriously, offering equity instead of cash, because you know what it is. I have 2 other people that I know, and they own a company together. One of them is the artist, one of them is the writer. They own the company, so they don't take a payment. So guess what? You just saved yourself a fuck ton of money, but you own 50% apiece.
yeah,
So
and
that's another solution. And
yeah, I would say, and that's a major thing. I mean, I personally didn't do this, but I would say that's a major thing. And if you're going to go the equity route for anybody, make sure that you are very solidified in your position. Where if you're going to be the writer, don't take forever to write, just like you're not going to want to rush the artist. You know, really be equitable and pull your weight. So if you're going to have the artist writing, then you better learn how to work Instagram. You better learn how to make reels. Like, bring that value outside of, hey, the great character designs, and also be receptive to feedback. Like, if an artist doesn't want to draw something and you said they're a 50-50 partner, listen to them, tweak the idea.
to a degree, to a degree.
Yeah, to
It,
a, you know, definitely to a degree.
if it's a book about submarines and your artist doesn't want to draw a submarine, you
Yeah,
got a problem.
yeah, for sure.
You got to figure out that solution.
For
Now,
sure.
if your artist doesn't want to draw 50 submarines in a scene, you know what? You could understand that they're going to get a little tired after a while of doing that. But if they have a problem with drawing one,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you got to think this one through a little bit, but hopefully, and also the other thing too is that you don't have to give the whole company away.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
could just have an equity arrangement on a series. You could have an equity arrangement on a lot of stuff. You don't even have to have 50-50. I know people who have a 40-60 arrangement, but the artist has something else where the artist has, certain parameters where if it goes to Netflix, it becomes the Netflix deal becomes 50-50.
Yeah.
And so
But
so there's just certain parameters in there, but also the artist might get a variant. So, if I'm to do equity, I might pay, or if I'm to do pay, I might say if I know an artist has a store, I might say to that artist, look, I'll give you a license to do 100 print run of a book. And if I know, and if I sold the rights to Netflix, and I know that I sold the right to Netflix, that might say you might want these 100 issues. So I had an equity arrangement on my Kickstarter with somebody, and they got product, and I got product. They didn't get paid, and it was actually a better deal for both of us, and it made more sense for
no,
me.
definitely. That stuff is also dope, and I had an idea as soon as you were saying it, but I just kind of lost it. Like you said, mention added equity as far as getting something, and just for a lot of people, also you just need to get your foot in the door. Not to say that you need to like whore yourself out or take a bad deal, but really negotiate and don't be afraid to talk business. A lot of creative people are afraid of business, but it's like just
A
have those
lot of companies
uncomfortable
are
conversations.
terrified of business.
Yeah,
I mean,
just
I mean, look, I try to find sponsors for this shows, and I say, look, why don't we just have a conversation? And companies do not want to have a conversation. They say you don't have a big enough Instagram following. I had a sponsor previously, and let's just say I returned them over 5 figures in sales on paying me 3 figures.
yeah,
That I mean, people I return them anywhere from a 12 to 18x rate of return. To give a little bit of a ballpark, and people would say, "No, you didn't." And I said, "Yes, I did." I would not be stating this publicly on air over and over and over again if it wasn't true.
yeah,
And there's a reason why, because I had the right audience. It was a printing company, and everybody needs printing cheaply. And
yeah.
I found a good company that was giving a good discount, and people were like, "I'll change my printer to save a boatload of money." But anyway, but again, just asking people what they want.
Yeah.
It's a big thing. People should ask me what I want when they come on my show. There's a lot of things I want, everybody, and it's not that hard. And in case anybody didn't realize, I interview a lot of freaking people, and I have a lot of people I know in a lot of different segments. I'm just saying that because this month alone, I've got asked like 10 times by people. It's crazy.
Listen, I believe it, man. The work shows. When you do work and you do good business, more will come.
Yeah, and I guarantee you, I mean, I was extremely exclusive this year, and I'm going to be more exclusive next year. Because when people attacked my show for my Kickstarter, for me asking for money for my show to be a guest on my show, people didn't realize that. I said, okay, I'll just become super exclusive. And when you all need media, I'll be very picky on who I want, when I want it, how I want it. And there you go. And a bunch of people are going to learn this the hard way. And it's my choice, and I'd rather not do an interview. And guess what? I'm interviewing some of the best people in the world. I'm interviewing a lot of people who have blue check marks now, which is crazy on Twitter. And then I'm stupid enough because I just ask.
Yeah.
I just ask. It's so just honest. But again, I digress. But I think it's interesting. And this is what I tell people. I always tell make sure you're economically okay before you do a comic book. And I just know people who have debt. I know way too many people who have debt and are not building wealth. Because let's be realistic on this. Making money in comics is hard.
For sure.
Yeah, you know exactly.
For
It's
sure.
like your day job. You know exactly what I'm talking about. It's so hard, right?
But
But yeah, no. And it's super interesting in that regard. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to get into, and I just think that also the fact that you have 3 books, you essentially have 4 products pretty much you got the graphic novel, which is the 3-in-1 book, and then you got the 3 single issues. It's super helpful too. And obviously you're really going through an exploration on feedback
Yeah.
with this. But I do want to talk about some reward stuff.
Sure.
I think that's interesting. So obviously digital copy of volume 1. So if you just want to read it, you're uncertain about all of this, you don't know what to expect. Obviously you can get a digital copy pretty cheaply, right? What
Yeah,
is it?
$10. $10.
Which isn't that bad for how many pages? What are you, like 96 pages, give or take?
Yeah, about 96 pages. So, I wanted to have it low enough to where it didn't feel like that big of a spend, but also understanding and not trying to devalue it because at the end of the day, it is 3 books. So it's like going to DC or Marvel. If you buy digital from them, you get one comic for $5. But here you get three for 10.
So to even talk about that a little bit, because obviously, I mean, my advertised rate, based on my experience, I know what I'm worth, and I know what I say to these companies, and I say, look, I can't devalue myself, and I know exactly what I'm worth to the T. And some people like it, some people don't, some people don't get it, and I say, look, I know what I'm worth. And what is that like for you? Because I hate to say this is messed up, but when you're first starting out in Hindi, it's hard to figure out what you're worth and what you should be charging because obviously you want customers. And I can say this the nicest way possible. I don't know who the hell you are.
Yeah.
Personally. Nothing against you. I mean, obviously
No, I get it. I've walked plenty of artist alley and been like, oh hell no, I'm not paying that, or just being like, all right, shut up and take my money. So for me, understanding what I'm worth, and for one, I'll tell people to separate your emotions out of it, because at the end of the day, after I've rewritten these comics several times. I went through several artists to get, for Dogpile, I went through 3 artists trying to find it and get it done the right way and things like that. And because of that, with something, when you are emotionally invested in something, you can want to charge through the roof for it, but understanding one, the marketplace, understanding the economics, and
So do you also feel that because this is what I hear is that you don't make money on your first book. You don't make money on your second book. You might make a little bit of money or break even on your second, and you might make a little bit of money on your third. On your fourth, you're probably going to break even and do a little bit above it, and then you do a trade paperback, and that's where you make all your money, or you make all your money at cons. Now, I personally think that's stupid business advice.
so
Um,
yeah, I was definitely going to get into that. Of just that was a part of the pricing strategy of understanding one, and no, understanding one. This is a business, so there has to be some sort of profit. There has to be, even if it's the bare minimum, to be able to cover expenses and just plus one. So one, to price it like that, and two, get it in a sweet spot of like where it doesn't feel that out of the cost of a consumer. For
because
anybody
I'm
that's
going to follow it up in a second, but continue.
Yeah, so for anybody that's buying books, whether the con prices are a little bit different from the Kickstarter prices and things like that, but just trying to make it accessible, trying to understand that and also the way I want to position the books, and these are different, and with that, it's a bit of a luxury to have different things. So not to say people are going to get sticker shock, but it's like this isn't what you might be used to, but the value and the thing that you'll get out of it will be worth more, and it's worth
So
the price.
this is one of the things that I'm curious about because obviously, I mean, when I threw out my advertising rate to the company that I worked with, I just threw out a number. I had no idea what the hell it was going to look like, but obviously results dictate, right? And so for me, I look at the market and I say, look, if I returned X to you, and if I mean, I got no problem telling people what my advertising rate for a live read is. It's $15 now. Before it was way less, but depending on what my rate was and what I returned, I'm saying to myself, well, the market should dictate X. In which if I return X amount of business to you, that's what I'm worth. So I hate to say it, if you can't afford me, go find somebody else for a permanent live read, and you could go to another podcasting company, and they'll give you 10,000. and they have a lot more views than I do, but that ad's not staying up permanently. And there's a big difference between that. And I know that I'm going to return you capital. And companies get upset with me. And I say, if you can't afford me, I understand. It's nothing personal, but this is what I'm worth. And I don't need your money. And if I'm going to read your shit,
Yeah.
it is. And so what was that like? Because obviously the market also determines where
Oh,
if somebody has 3 books or has a 100-page, graphic novel or a 160 graphic novel and they're charging 15, it's sort of a hard argument, I think, on a digital for you to charge 20 digitally. And this is something that I go with Zenoscope books. And I don't know if you're familiar with Zenoscope, but they do limited Bad Girl art of like 350, 375, and they're charging me $20 for a 375 cover. And I go to Kickstarter, and while somebody might only have 100 copies of that book, you're not a well-known artist. And then Paul Green's on that Zenoscope cover, and it's $25. So, that's my thing about, all of this is that I feel in Kickstarter in particular, people are somewhat overpriced for no names compared to a Zenoscope book that I know is worth money, if that makes any sense. And I'm not saying your book's not worth money, but when people don't have an early entry price, it's hard for me to get into your book too.
no, I definitely understand that. And I'll say, my argument to that is the work speaks for itself. And when I say the work speaks for itself, for people that go to my Kickstarter page, you see that, one, you see several celebrities, you see industry heavyweights like Todd McFarlane, Scott Snyder, Frank Miller, and stuff like that holding my book and endorsing my book to let you know that this is real. This is real deal. This isn't something, like I said, first and foremost, the book's done. Like a lot of Kickstarters or crowdfunded things are to complete something. It's like first we invested in ourselves. So at the very least, we took the time to put our own skin in the game to get this done and present it for you. We've gone to the cons, we've product tested in front of people to where, these prices are valid because I launched my Kickstarter at the end of September. And I spent this entire summer going to cons and selling hand to hand in person, just camping out with my mentor or just, showing up to conventions and getting a table and not really announcing it, but just doing the legwork of calling people over, going to the comic shops around New York City, selling and trying to get placed and things like that. So people might not see the work, but promise it's there, you know?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I look at something and I'm like, wait a second, because, and this is something that I have a conversation with cosplayers, and a cosplayer said something really stupid to me once. And she said, oh, I work really hard. And my response to her was saying, everybody.
No, everybody does for sure.
The point I'm getting at with this is that what she should have said is, I worked my ass off to get here. And that doesn't mean that the guy picking up garbage in New York City, slumping through suit, also doesn't work hard. She was trying to imply that, I'm the only one who worked hard. That's not what I'm saying about you. What I'm saying is that I have a very hard time with justification when somebody's charging me on Kickstarter like $30 for a cover A. Because that to me,
I'll admit to that. That's crazy.
I have a hard time with the cover A being $20 because when I compare it to, and it's from a no-name artist. Now, if somebody's charging me $10 for a book, and I don't know who you are, I get it's indie. I get that you're not mass producing it. I even understand 12. I can argue 15 with your book to some degree. It's a bit of a stretch, but when people start charging $20 for a cover A, I'm like, what the fuck? Because I can go to a named product that I know from a top artist who's making the circles, who that cover's good, and maybe the story's okay, maybe the story's bad, but I know what I'm getting. And that's my whole problem right now with this is that even with, people, and look, I've looked at people's Kickstarters and I'm like, your Kickstarter looks fantastic. And then I look at your price and I'm like, no, thank you. You know what I mean? Like, because there gets to a point where I'm priced out. And I'm very honest about this, where if you're charging $25 for a cover A, it's like, there's no way in hell I can afford that. I can't justify it. And it's not that your value, you could perceive your value, whatever. And I'm not saying you as in you, but you
Yeah.
get where I'm going with this argument. Like that value just isn't there for me. If your book was 15 on that, especially if it's your first Kickstarter too. I mean, that's the thing too, is that it depends where you are. If Pat Shan does a Kickstarter and he's been doing this forever, it's a little bit different too because it's the first one. And so that's my argument
No,
against that.
definitely, man. I definitely understand what you're saying. And same person, same thing. Like I'm a floppy fanatic, so I love floppies. I read trade. I've started to get more into trades, like because I'm also like a dollar bin killer. Like I love going to dollar bins, and just finding a bunch of shitty books that I normally wouldn't have bought, or just like looking through crazy stuff. Like the amount of trades I bought in the last couple of months, just because I've been wanting to read more. Because I'm going into the off for my day job. I'm going into the office more, so I need stuff to read on the subway. But you know, I I guess I that's it. Also comes back to just using yourself as the testing ground first, because it's like I know my pricing limits, and not even to say I'm wealthy or poor or anything, but it's like I try to be realistic. I know what I would pay for a book I really like. I know how much I paid going to cons to get people to sign things. So it's like I wanted to find that sweet spot of where like, all right, so it makes sense for me financially to where this isn't a money pit, but it also makes sense to where it doesn't seem like that
It-
hard
it-
to
it-
ask for someone
yeah,
else.
yeah. You can talk about that too, because one of the things that I don't think people realize is that how expensive it is to produce a book. I think creators sometimes don't even realize how expensive it is to produce a book. And I can tell you this, I don't think most people realize how expensive it is to produce this episode. It's expensive on a personal level. I mean, you know what it is? People don't realize that media is expensive. This is not free for me to produce this. It's expensive. And you know what?
Like there are subscriptions literally, to the streaming platforms that have it simulcast. I have to pay for the ring. Like I have a microphone on. Like all those things add up.
I mean, StreamYard is $25 a month, or it's $240 for the year. Hootsuite's expensive, and then it's my time, and then it's
Yeah.
other things too. And that's the other thing too that I think that people don't realize, that everything's expensive. So when I send out my advertising rates, it's all that's calculated into this. And I'm a big believer that I think in the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be way more pay to play. I really do. I think you're going to find a lot more podcasters actually asking for money. I think a lot more people are actually going to be going away from sponsors. And I even think sponsors are going to have a hard time finding shows to advertise on. I
No,
really think it's coming. And I think it's going to be good and bad for the industry.
no, I mean that's the definitely the writing on the wall for things like YouTube subscriptions, the Patreon, to I even look at it to the point where it's like everything is becoming niche. Like it's almost like if you like something, you're just gonna pay for it. Like whatever it is, like obviously, all being comic book fans here, Substack was the talk of the town and things like that. And is Substack working or not working is to be determined, but at least Substack is something that, we'll probably see more of, whether or not it's through a situation where people are going to Substack or if everybody's just doing stuff on their own website. And even like we talked about earlier, where, indie publishing and publishing houses and everybody cultivating their own kind of cult and, small fan base of like,
It's
we
getting
do this for you and here and you come to us for this.
it's getting interesting, because what's actually I think going to happen with that, and this is just my thought, is a lot of things have become clicky in comics, right? And so all these clicks have now come to the realization, and they're starting to, and this is just what I'm seeing, is that their click doesn't get them over the hump on funding. It doesn't get them over the hump on what they really need to produce the book, right? And so now they need to get outside. I'm not part of a clique for a good reason. I am out on my own island, and I'm having a beach party every day. But I mean, and I'm very honest, where I'm actually very sick of comic people. I have one more comic interview after you, and then I'm not doing any more comic people for season 3, unless somebody really interests me. I'm ending the season right before Thanksgiving, and then I'm taking like 5 weeks off just on vacation. But the idea is that I'll do wrestlers, I'll do some cosplayers, but it's gotten to the point where I think all these people, and this is why people are asking me now, because they're in cliques and their cliques aren't working. And I think that that's what's going to happen. And it puts me into a really good position. So I'm like, great. What are you doing for my show? That's the question now. I asked you that question. I had no problem admitting it. And I mean, I might ask some of the people who asked me, I say, hey, look, what are you bringing to my show? What are you bringing to my show? Because I have 4 other people and I'm only taking one of you. What are you bringing to the table?
No, for sure. And it makes sense. It makes sense. And it's I feel like everybody, like you meant, going even back to our conversation, people being brands, and brands have leverage. You have the leverage as your brand, and you want people. This is what I mean when I was also saying that creators have to understand business. That we are both here just leveraging relationships. As much as this is a fun conversation about comics and about the industry, I want your audience to see me. You want my audience to see you. Like, it's a business transaction at the end of the day, but people tend to forget about that or just don't want to admit it. But it's easier and more fun for everyone if we get that stuff out in the open, and we do the work and try to grow and make it organic as make it as organic as possible.
I think a lot of people are bad at business. I was on a show yesterday, and somebody threw me a very, very nice compliment, saying that if I do what I'm saying I'm going to do, I'm going to become very, very wealthy. And they threw a number at me, and they're probably wrong because it's probably going to be higher. But the compliment is still a compliment. And I'm going to be sharing that interview out like crazy. Where I'm going to be sharing it out. I'm going to legitimately schedule it twice a week on Hootsuite for the entire year because I want everybody to see it. I want everybody to see what I am and what I talk about when I talk about money and passive income. And it's a fascinating discussion. But again, that to me is I don't want their audience to see it. I want my audience to see it. Because when people see it, guess what? You're going to find out exactly how I function. And you know what it is? Maybe, people should pay attention and say, I get it. But I digress right there. But yeah, it's very interesting about business. And I think a lot of people in comics don't get it. I think a lot of people don't understand that if you don't know what I want, and get in my good graces, right? People back my Kickstarter because they wanted to get in my good graces. They paid for a guest spot. They wanted to get in my good graces. And guess what? A lot of people were pissed at me for it too. Because you know what is they're like, oh fuck, this guy's charging for media and he doesn't have the audience. And I'm like, but you don't get it. You're not paying for the audience. You're paying for access. Because how many shows, and then people are like, oh, there's other shows out there. And I'm like, really? Yeah, sure, there's other shows, but there's other people in comics too. There's less of us than there are of you. No offense.
Yes. I also laugh at people that ask for favors, like unrelated to you, but people that ask for favors and then turn around as if they didn't ask. It's like, are you really charging it? Well, you asked for the favor. You clearly wanted it.
I got a story for you. This is we're still live. This is great.
Well, to be a little bit more personal. So I work in investment banking, and I worked before then. I was an insurance broker where I'd literally have clients asking for insurance advice and say, "You guys are charging that much? You asked. You clearly want this. Don't pretend like you don't once you hear the price." Like, to make it seem like, no, who would pay for that? You asked. You came up. You asked.
My favorite thing is that, so I started doing it, right? And I started advertising all these groups. Some guy said, oh, you're charging too much. And some guy said, I have a book. I said, hey, man, back to Kickstarter. And then the second I did that, he said, your show sucks.
It's insane. It's like, then why'd you reach out?
So every time I posted, he trolled me. And so it got to the point where me and my friends on my birthday, after drinking for a while, we started building a playlist of how to respond to him. So we only got through one song. We got through one song, and it was great. After I did it, all I did is I put up "Stop" by the Spice Girls. I was begging for him. I was begging for him to go 15 rounds. I had the whole playlist. I had stuff. I had Baby Come Back. ready to go. You can blame it all on me. I had so much stuff, and then I had some weird stuff in there. Oh my god! And then I had Cake Go the Distance. Oh my god! I had like every genre, like literally every genre was in my playlist, and I had 50 of them ready to go. And I was begging for it. I was begging for it. I was begging for it. But it only took one. But anyway, I digress right there. This is so far outside of your rewards. So far outside of your rewards.
Listen, but it's great conversation, and I appreciate you for having me on the show. But I tell people like these are the moments where you build value. Like you said, to be able to have a conversation, to start a conversation about rewards, then to just be talking and laughing and having fun, and you know these are the soft skills that are very important as one promoting the Kickstarter. I'm able to reveal a little bit of my personality, and we're both building interview skills here. We're having fun. Especially I always go back to I'm a fan first. This is the shit I like most in podcasts or shows. It's just people letting their guard down and just talking and having a good time and just feeling like the fly on the wall, or that person that's just like, yeah, I do that too, or yeah.
It's interesting because I've been told in podcasting, oh, you should keep it to an hour, or oh, you should keep it tight. And I'm saying to myself, but I don't think society wants that.
No.
I think society wants long form conversation and wants to vet a person. So I was on, a show and I had about 40 minutes, but I wanted like a 3-hour conversation about passive income and diving into it and talking about it and talking about the thought process. Now it was a good interview. It's a great piece. But again, I got certain things in there, and I came in a very interesting way, and I came in a little less than this. I was probably at an 8. But the idea is that I came in very humble because I am very humble in what I do, in a lot of ways, especially in comic book investing. But I think that I don't think people want a 45-minute interview. No offense. I think people want a real conversation, and it's pointed to some degree, but it's also relaxed, and we're having a conversation about your book and about you and about life and about your rewards. Getting back to that, obviously, you get the physical copy of the book. You could get all 3 floppies. I think you could get both. You get the T-shirt. You get the T-shirt bundle with comics. You get the whole like big thing. You get multiple bundles and a bunch of other stuff. But yeah, a lot of rewards is my point.
Yeah, definitely. I just to mention a little other rewards, just wanting to be flexible. So, like we had mentioned, for people that might just want, there's a tier where if you only want dog pile, you don't care about the rest, you can just get one. You can get all 3, or you can just get the trade version. You can get the version like all 4 together like this. Get the T-shirt. Get a variant cover because everybody loves variant covers and things like that. But just I wanted tiers that were practical, things that were affordable, mixing in some digital stuff there too for people that are on the go, but stuff that wasn't, that wouldn't price anybody out, stuff that, you felt like you were getting something cool.
Yeah, because I think that's a big thing too, because obviously going back to what I was saying, at $25, I'm priced out.
Yeah.
It's the idea that, and I hate to say this, but your campaign and there's 50 other campaigns going on that are all at the same level. And that's the thing too, that if you're charging 15 or you're charging 20 and somebody's charging 15 and it's all at the same level, I gotta really love your book, or I could go find a Kickstarter. I mean, I know people who sell their books for like $7. Now they're printing 3,000 of their books on like off print pressing, and they have a different battle plan. That's why they could charge so cheap for it. But again, that's the thing too, is that I, as the consumer, have massive choice, and so I think affordable pricing is a necessity at this point.
For sure, for sure.
And I hate to say it, but I think it's gonna even go further into that. I think the margins on books and comics are actually going to dwindle. I do, and it's not printing. I think that the more projects there are on Kickstarter, the cheaper it becomes for the consumer, because I have now choice.
Yeah.
Anytime I have choice, it's cheaper all the time. It's just the way it is. It's called business. That's called capitalism.
No, you're not lying, man. You can say that for sneaker prices or they say the way, fast fashion ruined the fashion industry of making it ubiquitous and making anybody be able to go get a t-shirt and things like that, or a graphic t-shirt, has made places like Hot Topic and things like that come down on prices, has made people reevaluate and rethink what they're doing.
So I think that obviously, I mean, and look, I'm more likely to back a book in which that I have a number in my head. I like a cover ad about $10. I do. I really feel comfortable at $10. I feel super comfortable at $10. If your book is average and it's a $10 price point, I'm probably a buyer. If your book is above average and it's a cover A, I'll feel comfortable at 12. If it's a variant, I'll buy it at 20. If it's a good variant and it's a clever variant, or if it's from a well-known artist.
Yeah.
But if you're charging me, $25, if it's a good artist and it's a well-known artist, maybe, but even still.
No, for sure. And like I said, we're both the market. And when I say we're both the market, it's like, if I could never, as a business person and just anybody asking for a favor, if I wouldn't be willing to do something, I can't expect other people to do it.
Yeah, no, it's. I mean, I'm very honest about it. I bought ads on podcasts. I bought ads on wrestling shows,
Yeah.
and so I got no problem asking a price. And if people don't feel comfortable on an advertising price, if people don't feel comfortable when I run a Kickstarter, you know what is? I mean, this is my new solution. My new solution next time I run it, if I get shit, I can say, why don't you come on and tell me what your issue is? And we'll have a conversation about it. Why don't you tell me why I shouldn't do this when you run crowdfunders?
Yeah.
So let's see how fast people do it, because what they don't understand, if they're smart, they're going to decline it. If they're smart, they're going to decline. If they're not smart, they're going to come on and they're going to brand themselves as a gatekeeper. I'm asking for it, and I don't think it's because I'll spend real money to advertise that on Facebook. I will hire somebody from Upwork who's a Facebook marketing expert to advertise that episode to prove a point. I will get somebody removed from comics because of it, and nobody will ever question me ever again. I've said this on a live show before, and I'll say it again right here. No problem doing that. But again, totally going to get you canceled, man. I'm sorry that I ended your comic career early. This is what happens on this show.
Yeah.
It's what I do best. But yeah, so I think we talked about a lot of stuff here. A lot of stuff.
For sure, man. Like I said, thanks for having me, man. People, please.
We're not done.
We're not? Oh.
But I actually do want to back out of this a little bit, and I do want to talk about the con stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
I haven't been to a con in a while. I personally, at this stage for a while, I used to do fan panels, but since I've been doing podcasting and live streaming, I actually don't foresee a position of going back so quickly. I also am right now entering the self-help space with comic book investing and some other stuff. And so for me to be at a con, I don't have a physical product. And so I have a different viewpoint where my space is online. And so for me, I don't think it makes sense for me to be at a con right now. They're also expensive. There's other things. And if for me to go to a con and do a panel, it takes me out for the week going and for the week out. So it's actually giving me, I have to give up about 8 interviews, which is worth money to me. And so I need to be taken care of in some fashion. And cons don't want to pay that right now. I think they will eventually. I think they're going to have to. I think just like everything else, there's going to be a point where all this shifts. And also with my class, I think I'm going to be just having an exuberant fee because why not? But anyway, what is that like? Because I know New York Comic Con was somewhat interesting this year. I also know that Baltimore is going to be interesting. And I'm curious how you view it, because is the con you feel healthy? Were people spending more money? Were people being more selective? And were lines bigger? Or did it all play out? Because it's kind of tricky, I feel, right now, the space.
Yeah, so I will say cons are. I've been doing cons since my first con. I was like in middle school, so my first con, I was like in eighth grade, and I was like super pumped to meet Riley Brown and Chuck Dixon and Larry Hama and things like that. Like, so cons are and even going to cons, before I started making comics, and preparing to to do a bunch of different things and spend a bunch of money. I feel like it's a little bit different now, and I'll say from New York Comic Con last year to New York Comic Con this year, going from the fan side to now kind of being on the industry side, it's cons are obviously big, huge, a big money pit and things like that. But you are seeing different demographics, and when I say different demographics, like you're seeing more, and I don't want to disrespect anybody, but you're seeing more spectators. People who are coming to cons just to kind of see what's going on, versus coming and knowing specifically, oh, I'm trying to go to this panel, I want to bump into this creator, I want to get this signed, or I'm looking for this exclusive. Like you see a lot of people that are just kind of, there aimlessly just trying to check out the scene that might like one or two movies, or, really like one anime and things like that.
So let me try to sum it up a little bit, if you don't mind, and take a
Yeah,
stab. It almost is like somebody is not a season ticket holder to the Giants, but they buy tickets for one game because they like the New York Giants, but they're not a season ticket holder.
exactly.
That doesn't mean they're not a fan of things. They're just not. They don't have a key to the club, but they're renting the key to the club.
Yeah, so I guess that's definitely been the change that I've seen, this year, especially with cons. And, maybe it's because more people are willing to venture out because, we've been on lockdown and things like that. So that's been the biggest shift. Not to say, it's people don't know what's going on. It's like people are just like really curious. So for on the sales side, it's definitely been interesting and very helpful because people are open to buying because they're just bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. So it's like calling someone over to a table and saying like, hey, like check this out, because they might not have all the biases, or they don't have as strict of a con plan of like, all right, so I have to stand in line and meet Scott Snyder, then I have to make sure I go to fucking Greg Capullo signing, or I gotta go see Tom King and things like that. Like, people are literally just walking around just hoping to be impressed and things like that. So for me, I feel like, especially going to Baltimore and the other cons I've been to, cons are going to be a thing I heavily plan for next year, just to really, as if I was a local band trying to get signed to a major label, wanting to play any shithole club and just trying to be seen by as many people and try to get out there and network, build those relationships and things like that. So it's definitely important for me and a part of my major goals for the business next year and things like that. And also, cons are fun for me. Cons are fun. It's been a little bit different, because I'm not spending as much money as the cons, because I'm not buying a bunch of things, because I'm like, shit, I have to work my table. But I think cons are still healthy. I just think it'll get to a point where I think the trend now is a bunch of, like you said, people that buy the one day they're not season ticket holders. They're buying the ticket for one day, just to check it out and see what's going on.
I mean, I haven't been to a con. I don't foresee going to one, honestly. I mean, my game plan has changed, and I mean, I'm doing more than enough in the digital space, and I am jaded. I've had some bad experiences, and there's a lot of other things going on, and I really am a big digital guy right now, and I think the digital space is only getting bigger, and I think it's actually where everything is.
Yeah, that's the one thing I will say I do miss about having the pandemic year cons, is that being able to catch every panel. Like I love the fact that SDC, San Diego Comic Con at home, and being able to catch every panel and seeing the interviews and not missing anything because you're all the way in the back of the hall and shit like that. So
For me, I don't have a desire to go back. I don't. I really don't. It's odd because I'm making more money in my eBay business than I've ever made. I actually I'm having a crazy year,
Yeah.
and I don't foresee it slowing down. And people are like, oh, you don't have a website, you're not selling out of account. I'm like, yeah, but my expenses are dirt cheap, and I don't foresee it slowing down. And there's so much more things that I can do. And honestly, I'm building out a class, and I'll build out another class, and you know what it is? People need my class, and it's great. I teach you how to invest in comic books. Everybody needs that class. They really do in comics. And you know what it is? There's so much money to be made, and it's
No, for
crazy. But
sure.
that's how I'm gonna make. Actually, that's not how I'm gonna make my real money. I'm gonna make my real money as an investor. It's in my name, guys. It's in my name. Um, but the whole thing is that yeah, I don't miss it. And things have changed. I'm 30 and I'm 29, I'm gonna be 30 in January. So I'm almost 30 and things have changed, ideas have changed. And yeah, that's where I'm at. And it's a complicated thing. It really is. And so I don't know what'll get me excited to go back to a con. I don't. I digress. It's an internal problem. And even if I had a book, I'm gonna be so selective because if I do write a book and it's a hit, I'm gonna go to three cons. This way, those three cons I go to, it's meaningful.
Yeah, no, for sure. I guess that's coming into this a little bit different. That's one thing that I try to hustle different, and I'm the guy that's calling everybody over to my booth at Audience Alley. The one that's like doing a lot of the groundwork versus just sitting at the table. I want to make these things worthwhile.
Oh, I'm gonna be way different.
Yeah, exactly,
I can
exactly.
take all see, I like to make it an event, right?
Yeah,
That's what I like to do. I like to make something an event. I don't wanna make it so I'll do 4 cons a year if I wrote a really successful book, and people be like, "Why are you doing that?" And I'll do, like, maybe 10 comic shops, and I'm gonna do some weird comic shops that people are like, "You're gonna be heavily advertising you being at a shop that does no traction? Why?" Because it makes it an event. And so I want to become a high ticket item
no,
because
for sure.
I like
It's
that.
it's Chrome Hearts. It's the Chrome Heart and Supreme model, man. Supreme only sells in their own stores, and they only drop on Thursday.
Because I want to control the media. I like
Yeah.
controlling the media. I like controlling the ebb and flow, and I like having complete power. And it's amazing. And I think that's something that is very different. And you know what it is? I want to get to the point where when I go to a con, I'm pulling in 150K.
No,
For me to speak about comic book investing at a con, my goal is to charge 15K for it, and I'm not speaking ever again for free on that topic because I know way too much about the topic, and so if a con can't afford to pay me, they can't afford to pay me, they will not get that speech. If they want 3 hours for me to speak, I'll speak for however long they want me to speak for. But it's not
the
negotiable.
set rate. The price is the price. Yo,
And
can I get one moment? Let me just put my phone on the charger. Just give me one moment. I'll be right back. All right.
take your time.
All right. Can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Perfect.
So,
Perfect.
so, so, so obviously, that's where we're at, and I figured we should probably start wrapping up because I don't want to deplete your phone completely.
Oh no, we're good, man. We're good. As long as you guys can still hear me fine, we're all good.
But I do want to give you a chance to self promote because obviously you got a lot of stuff going on. Where can people bother you? Where can people find you? Where can people hit you up? Where can people back the campaign and all that stuff? Because we really covered a variety of topics, and I'm looking forward to cutting this thing up soon. And what I mean by soon is December. But a lot of micro content because there's a lot of good stuff in this. But again, where can people find you, hit you up, check out your campaign, all that good stuff?
Yeah, so obviously at Blacktooth Publishing. So at Blacktooth Publishing, spelled just like it sounds, Blacktooth Publishing, blacktoothpublishing.com. If you want to check out the Kickstarter, blacktoothpublishing.com/Kickstarter. Just go to Kickstarter, search Blacktooth Battalion, or just search Blacktooth Publishing will pop up. If you want to find me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Big Bank Aaron. So BIGBANKAAAREN. I'll be at Baltimore Comic Con, probably be at any other Comic Con on the East Coast. I have a lot of plans within the new year. Oh yeah, we're also on YouTube, Blacktooth Publishing, TikTok. I'm on TikTok at Big Bank Aaron. So pretty much everywhere, man. So I really appreciate you. Thank you so much. Keep running up the Kickstarter. Please check us out. Our goal is 5,000, and we're about, last time I checked, we were like 1,500 away. So we're like at 35, right? A little over 35 right now. So slowly but surely getting there. Got over 20 or so days left. So hoping to keep pushing, hoping to get there. And, like I said, the books are done. So, for the people that pledged to the campaign, once the campaign's done and Kickstarter gives me the money, out express shipping, express printing, we're gonna get it out to people as soon as possible.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna keep saying it. I've been saying it for 3 years, and I'm gonna keep saying it. You have to support indie, and what that means is that when people have Kickstarters going on, you have to back their Kickstarters. When people have books in their stores or cons, you gotta buy their books, and you have to actually spend money if you want to see content get created, or books get made, or anything get made. And so that's something that you have to do. And then furthermore, obviously you definitely need to follow people on social media. It makes a difference. And then you need to engage with them on social media, because it is ultra important to actually retweet, share, and check out what people are doing, because it does make a difference in a lot of ways. And that's something that you should do. And you should do both if you can. And there's no pledge that is too small. I ran a Kickstarter. People who threw me $1, it's not too small. People who threw me $120, it's not too big, is my point. So that's something to keep in mind, where $1 goes a long way. And my friend says it really well. If you had 1,000 people and they each give you $1, a lot of small people giving you $1, it goes a long way.
No, for sure, for sure.
Just to put this in perspective, if I had 1,000 people every month giving me $1, that'd be $12,000, and I guarantee you that I would not be producing 4 interviews a week. We would be producing 10. And so there would be a lot more content out there. There'd be a lot more cooler shit, for lack of a better word. And again, what's $1? $1 is not all that much. It's, you can't even buy coffee in America for $1 anymore. So there you go. It's not that much, and it makes a huge difference. But I digress right there. To promote myself really quickly, obviously all my social media is Pop Anime Comics on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. It's Pop Anime Comics. I do not have a TikTok that I would like to publicly disclose. I'm not on TikTok all that often, so you won't find me there for the most part. And then I have other social media accounts too. But again, most of them are under Pop Anime Comics, so you can find me there. Please check out what I do, interact with me. I'm a very friendly individual. Furthermore, I have this t-shirt up on Redbubble right now. I'm a huge Gundam fan, so that is super cool. You can pick that up, as well as I have this up on eBay right now, with my good friend and cosplayer DJ Croft. He is out of his metal card, so I'm the only person you can buy that from. It is a metal card. I also have this one up right here. She's a very attractive woman. You just don't want to wake up next to her with her holding a knife. That's all I'm going to say on that one. But all jokes aside, yeah, all my stuff's up there. Check it out. Pop Anime Comics, eBay, Pop Anime Comics. And I have a comic book investing class coming soon, where it is 18 to 22 hours. It's going to be about $40 on Udemy. So if you want to learn the basics of comic book investing, that's the class for you. Otherwise, you can check out all my other stuff. I got almost 600 interviews. So it's all up on YouTube, and you can check that out. And there's an interview for you out there for you to enjoy. It's all free, so check it out. And on that note, I'm going to give you the final word.
Listen, man, I appreciate it. Please support my Kickstarter. Check us out, Black Tooth Publishing, Black Tooth Battalion Volume 1 out right now for pre-order.
Well, I think that is a perfect place to end. And that